Maria had been assigned to clean the cockpit of the old transport plane for months, and she knew every lever and switch by memory. Today, she moved carefully across the cramped space, wiping down surfaces and checking dials that always seemed to gleam under the harsh lights. She had developed a rhythm for her work, sweeping crumbs and dust from corners that others did not notice, brushing away fingerprints and smudges from polished metal panels, and felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing the cockpit gleam as if it had been reborn. Every inch she touched seemed to whisper stories of flights long past, yet today there was something different in the air, something that made her fingers hesitate over a small patch tucked under the dashboard. She had cleaned this section countless times before, but for some reason her gaze lingered on it. It bore an emblem she had never seen before, a symbol that looked official yet strangely ominous. She reached out to straighten it, her hand trembling slightly as her mind spun with questions. She had no answers for who had put it there. What did it mean? Why had she never noticed it before? She adjusted the patch and then froze. When the cockpit door opened without warning, the commander stepped in. A man she had seen countless times, his face, usually composed, now showed attention. She had never witnessed. His eyes fell on the patch and immediately went wide. The skin of his face seemed to drain of color. Maria felt a chill creep down her spine. She sensed that something she could not yet name had changed forever in that room. She wanted to speak, to ask if she had done something wrong, but no words came out, only a strange quiet that filled the cockpit like a thick fog. The commander swallowed hard, his hand shaking slightly as he moved toward the dashboard. Maria tried to back away, but the cramped space gave her nowhere to go. She noticed his gaze flicker to the window, then back to the emblem, then to her face, as if trying to decide what to do next. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest, echoing against the metal wall. She could feel every pulse like a drumbeat in a silent jungle. The plane itself seemed to hold its breath. The engines outside hummed idly, but inside there was only the sound of her own fear and the faint scratch of her rag against the console. Maria remembered the first day she had entered the cockpit. She had been nervous then too, but nothing had prepared her for this. The small emblem seemed to pulse in the dim light, like a secret alive and aware of her presence. She reached for the cloth in her hands as if it could somehow, quote, shield her from what was happening. But the commander suddenly stepped forward, his voice a mere whisper. Maria could not understand the words, but the tone carried authority and panic all at once. He gestured toward the door, and then back to the patch, and then to her. And Maria realized that every instinct she had told her to stay calm and still, yet every muscle in her body screamed to flee. She took a small step back, her foot brushing against the edge of the seat. She stumbled slightly, and the commander flinched, his hand darting toward a button. She did not recognize a red one near the emblem. She knew it must be important because of the way he moved, like a predator protecting something precious. She remembered the stories she had overheard in the hangar, whispers about classified missions and secret cargo that no one was supposed to see. She had laughed at them, thinking they were exaggerations or fantasies. Yet now the laughter seemed foolish, a fool's comfort against the truth unfolding in front of her. Maria tried to study the patch again, noticing symbols and letters she had never seen. Her mind racing to decode them, she wondered if she should touch it again, if she should call for someone, or if simply being there was already a crime. She had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable in her life, yet there was a strange curiosity, to a pull toward understanding what lay behind that small piece of fabric, and the terror in the commander's eyes made it seemed even more powerful, as if it held the weight of the world. The commander suddenly spun toward the cockpit door again, his movements sharp and urgent. Maria could feel the tension in the room thickening. Like smoke, she realized she could not leave yet. She also could not act without understanding the consequences. Her hands shook as she gripped the rag tighter, her mind replaying every rule she had ever learned about protocol and secrecy, yet nothing seemed to apply to this moment. She wanted to ask questions, but the words got stuck in her throat. As if the cockpit itself had swallowed them, she noticed a small panel beneath a patch that she had never seen before, a latch barely visible but clearly important. She did not touch it, yet she felt its presence like a heartbeat of the plane itself. The commander suddenly looked back at her, his eyes sharp and searching. Maria felt like she had been caught in a net of invisible threads. Every movement monitored, every thought exposed. He whispered again, and this time she understood a single word, the word that made her knees weaken and the sweat bead on her forehead. She realized she had stumbled into something far beyond cleaning or routine maintenance outside the cockpit. The hangar lights flickered, a shadow passed over the window, and Maria thought she saw another figure pause and glance in her direction. She felt a jolt of fear, wondering if more people knew about the patch, if more people were watching, if simply being there had made her the focus of something dangerous. She wanted to duck behind a seat, but the commander moved as if anticipating her thoughts, his gaze never leaving her hands or the patch. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low and urgent. Maria felt the words press into her chest like weights. She did not understand them, yet every instinct told her they were warnings. She took a slow breath, counting to 10, trying to steady her shaking heart. She noticed the way the light hit the patch and realized the colors were not ordinary. They seemed to shimmer slightly, almost as if alive and aware of her attention. The cockpit seemed to tighten around her, the instruments and panels suddenly more menacing than tools, the metal edges sharper, the levers more threatening, and Maria understood she had crossed an invisible line, a boundary no one had warned her about but one that she had stepped over. The commander finally turned away briefly, as if to check something beyond the cockpit. Maria took the moment to study the emblem again, noticing minute details. She had never seen the stitching, precise, almost surgical. The colors muted, but deliberate, the letters arranged in a code that her mind could not yet parse. She realized this was no ordinary patch. This was a key, a signal, and her presence near it made her both witness and potential accomplice. Her thoughts raced through every story she had ever heard about spies, secret missions, and hidden documents. She wondered if she had accidentally become part of one of those stories she had always thought were fiction, but the reality was far more terrifying. She felt the plane beneath her feet like it had become sentient, aware of the tension and ready to act. Maria did not notice how long she had been standing there, her arms still raised as if frozen in place. She realized her rag was still in her hand, and she wondered if she should drop it, if that small action could change everything. The commander glanced back at her again, his face pale and drawn. Maria noticed the subtle twitch of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. Every detail screamed urgency. She wanted to speak, to ask a single question, but fear held her mute. She realized that sometimes silence was the only safe choice. She could not leave because she did not know what leaving meant. She could not act because she did not know the consequences, and she could not remain calm because her mind screamed that something monumental had been revealed in that cockpit, and that she was at its center. The hum of the engines outside seemed louder now, like a distant warning. Maria felt her pulse quicken, every small sound amplified the shifting of her weight. The scrape of her shoe against the floor, the faint click of a lever, all made her heart jump. The commander suddenly moved closer again, gesturing sharply toward the patch. And then the door. He spoke again, and this time his voice carried desperation. Maria realized the words were irrelevant. What mattered was the tone, the urgency, the fear that had drained the color from his face. She could feel it in her bones. She could feel it in her bones. She knew that in this small, confined space, a decision had been made without her knowledge, and now she was caught in its consequences. She could not tell if the patch was dangerous because of what it represented, or because someone had decided it should. She took another small step back, trying to put distance between herself and the emblem and the commander, but the cockpit was too small. She felt trapped in the tension like a butterfly caught in a jar. She wanted to run, yet her body refused to. Move, she realized she had become an observer of a secret, larger than herself, a witness to a truth that could not yet be spoken, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on her like the plane itself was holding her in place. Maria looked at the patch one last time before the commander moved again, and in that instant, she understood that her simple task of cleaning had ended. She had entered a story far larger than she could imagine, and there was no turning back. Maria could feel the tension in the cockpit, thickening like a storm cloud, ready to break, she realized. The commander was no longer just reacting to the patch, he was reacting to her presence, as if her eyes had betrayed a curiosity. She could not hide, every muscle in her body tensed. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, to deny her awareness, yet no words emerged, only the pounding of her heart. Echoing against the metal walls, she noticed the commander glance toward the small window. A shadow flickering outside, and her pulse quickened. She understood that the patch was not the only secret that mattered. Someone was watching, or waiting, or both. She felt trapped in the cockpit with invisible lines drawn around her that she dared not cross. The commander suddenly leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. Maria could not understand the words, but the fear behind them was unmistakable. He gestured toward the emblem again, and then to a small panel beneath it, a latch that seemed insignificant yet radiated danger. She instinctively took a step back, her mind racing through every story of espionage and secret missions she had ever heard in her life. She realized with a chill that she was standing in the middle of one now. Her simple task of cleaning had turned into a test she did not know. She had signed up for every instinct screamed to leave, yet the metal floor beneath her feet and the tension in the commander's gaze made her realize that leaving was not an option outside. The cockpit, the hangar, was silent, yet she could sense movement, shadows passing under the dim lights. She wondered if anyone else knew about the patch, if someone had alerted higher authorities, or if the commander himself had made a decision that would determine her fate. Maria felt a cold sweat break across her forehead. She gripped the rag tighter in her hands, not because she needed it for cleaning, but because it was the only object that connected her to the ordinary world she had known. She wanted to ask questions, but she knew that even a single misstep could trigger a chain of events she could not control. Commander finally moved to the seat, adjusting dials and switches with swift, precise motions. Maria watched every movement. Like a hawk, her curiosity and fear intertwined. She noticed a small red button near the patch and realized that it must be critical. He glanced at it, then at her, and the panic in his eyes deepened. Maria felt the weight of the situation crush her chest. She realized that everything she had done to maintain routine and order in the cockpit was now irrelevant. The real rules were hidden in the emblem, in the latch, in the commander's gestures. She understood that she was a witness to something monumental, a secret that could not be spoken, and yet her presence alone made her complicity. Sudden noise outside made both of them start. Maria flinched, and the commander stiffened his hand, moving toward the panel. Instinctively, she took a half step back, every nerve screaming in protest. The shadow passed the window and disappeared, yet the tension remained. Maria noticed the colors of the patch shimmer slightly, almost as if alive and aware of her gaze. She realized she could no longer ignore it. Every detail mattered. The stitching, the symbols, the muted colors, all spoke of missions and orders she had no right to know about. She wanted to run, yet her legs refused to move. She understood that the cockpit was now a trap, a small universe of secrets and fear. The commander spoke again, his words rushed and frantic. Maria did not understand them, but she felt the urgency, like an invisible hand pressing on her chest. She realized that the emblem and the panel beneath it were keys to something much larger, a chain of decisions and consequences. She had stumbled into a world she did not belong to, yet she could not leave. Because knowledge had already crossed the boundary into her mind, time stretched as the commander checked the instruments again and then locked his gaze on Maria. She noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the pallor of his face, and understood that the patch represented More than a symbol, it was evidence, power, and danger, all in one. Her role had changed. From cleaner to observer to participant, whether she wanted it or not, she had crossed the line, and the cockpit held its breath with her. She realized that soon every action and inaction would matter, every look and gesture would be weighed in. The balance of secrets she did not understand, and as the engines hummed softly outside and the shadows moved silently across the hangar, Maria knew that her life had shifted irrevocably into the unknown.